Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Libraries as Cooling Centers. Every library can be one. This webinar is part of a webinar series from the Northeast Summit on Climate Adaptation for Library Facilities, a collaboration of state library agencies from Maine to Maryland. Today's webinar was planned by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services and the Vermont Department of Libraries. The chat is available for you to interact with other attendees, but any questions that you want the presenters to answer should be submitted through the Q&A button, which should be in the menu at the bottom of your screen. And a link to the slides and the recording will be emailed to all registered attendees once they are available. To get a sense of where people are joining from, I'm going to run a quick poll. I'm going to put the link in the chat, and it's a very brief 1 to 2 question survey, just to get a snapshot of everyone, where they're coming from. And I'll keep that poll running until our presenter begins. And with that, I will turn it over to Joy.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Joy Warland, and I am a consultant at the Vermont Department of Libraries. And our keynote speaker today is from Vermont. So his name is Jared Ulmer, and Jared is the Climate and Health Program Manager at the Vermont Department of Health. And part of his work is communicating to the public in advance of extreme heat events about how to stay safe. And that includes knowing where local cooling centers are. So he's really helped raise awareness about these topics in the Vermont library world, partly by gathering a list of libraries with air conditioning and other cooling resources. And then he also shares resources and announcements about heat events with the Department of Libraries that we then disseminate to libraries throughout the state so they can be prepared to inform and meet the needs of their community members. So we're very excited to have Jared as our keynote speaker today. Welcome, and thank you for being here, Jared.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I can get my screen sharing going again. Okay, can somebody give me thumbs up or voice to, okay,
Yes,
great. Thank you. Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you for that introduction, Joy. Hi again, I'm Jared, managing the Climate and Health Program at the Department of Health. I've been in this role for about 10 years, and we work on a variety of different strategies to help improve Vermont's ability to reduce health impacts related to climate change. I would say that hot weather preparedness is the main topic that we've been working on in recent years, kind of acknowledging that there's a lot of work happening on flooding, on cyanobacteria blooms, on a lot of other topics with other resources. And we found that hot weather preparedness was a topic that was particularly under-resourced, and there's a lot of work to be done. So we've tried to kind of plug into this space and provide more resources, more awareness about hot weather impacts as we get increasingly warm in Vermont. And I'm so appreciative to be here. I have a lot of affinity personally and professionally for libraries. I have a 5-year-old. We are heavy library users. So thank you to all the Chittenden County libraries in Vermont for stocking kids' books about dragons. I think we've checked all of them out at this point. And thank you all, professionally, because I'm aware that libraries are doing more and more related to climate action and climate adaptation. So I'm excited to talk to you today about the potential role for libraries as community cooling sites during heat events. A lot of what I'll talk about is going to be Vermont specific, but I think is largely representative of situations in other New England states. I'm funded by a CDC climate and health grant, and several of the other New England states are funded by this similar grant. So if you're not already connected with my counterpart in your state that does climate and health work, I'm happy to find out who that contact is and make sure that that information gets shared around. Hot weather preparedness is a really important topic for all of us. Okay. So I have a couple different things that I'm hoping to talk through today. First, I want to just give a little bit of background overview of how climate change is affecting health related to hot weather. Who we're thinking about that is most affected, and then that can lead into what libraries can do as cooling centers. And I have a couple of other potential strategies to be thinking about. And then I have a few resources that I want to share towards the end. Okay, so I don't think this is new information. Vermont and all of New England is getting warmer and wetter with more extremes. We've gotten about 3 degrees warmer on average since 1900 in Vermont. We know we're going to continue getting warmer. It's more a question of by how much. The best case scenario projections, we might get about 3 degrees warmer by the end of this century, and worst case might be closer to 12 degrees. So we know that this is a problem that's not going away. It's probably going to get worse. So we're trying to get ahead of this before we get hit by a major heat emergency in the Northeast. I find numbers like this are sometimes a little challenging to comprehend in terms of like a specific day and how hot it could get or how frequently it could get hot. This is one of I have a couple of data heavy slides. This is one of them. I'll just warn you. That gives some examples in Chittenden County at the Burlington Airport, which is one of our main weather stations in Vermont, just to give some perspective on how things are changing and how we expect them to change into the future. In the recent past, the latter half of the 20th century into the early 21st century, we were seeing about a day a year where the temperature exceeded 95 degrees, and about 4 days per year where it exceeded 90. And those numbers have more than doubled in the past decade. And we're also something that we're also seeing and curious about is we're seeing an even faster increase in hot nights. And that's particularly concerning for people that don't have air conditioning, because I think historically we've relied on, if you live somewhere that doesn't have air conditioning, it's going to get pretty hot during the day, but open it up at night and things cool back down and all is well. And that's getting harder and harder to do in the evenings when temperatures sometimes don't drop below the 70s. So we're already seeing what we expect for climate change impacts in the first part of this century. We're probably a little advanced in that we're already there in 2025, and expect the number of these hot days to probably double by mid-century. And then you can see some of the big numbers towards the end of the century where we could be having multiple weeks of temperatures above 90 and 95. So unfortunately, much more heat to come. This is my other very data heavy slide for those of you who like such things, to give a little bit of information about the types of the amount of health impact we're seeing and how it varies by month and by different temperatures that we reach. We do see more health impact early in the year. Temperatures aren't quite as hot in May as the rest of the year, but we tend to see kind of a disproportionate amount of health impact in May as we're moving out of the winter. It takes our bodies time to acclimate to warmer conditions. So an 80 degree in May is going to hit us a lot harder than an 80-degree day in August or September when our bodies are much more used to it. So we're particularly concerned and looking out for major temperature spikes early in the year that could have impacts on folks. But typically we see the most impact midsummer when the temperatures are the hottest. We can see heat-related health impacts in our emergency department data, even at temperatures in the 70s, especially again early in the year if you're getting out and doing something very active that you're not used to doing. that can really affect people, but we tend to see more health impact once the temperature gets above 80. And actually, I should be saying heat index, which is temperature and humidity. When the heat index gets above 80, we start to see more health impact, but then especially once it gets above 90. And we do have a small number of heat-related deaths in Vermont, typically at those higher numbers. I'm going to circle back on this a little bit, but those are most all of those are older adults that don't have air conditioning, and those fatalities have happened at home. There are a few that have happened in outdoor environments as well, but most of them happen at home. So to go into a little bit more about who we see most affected, we see a couple of different categories of risk factors, and often these can overlap. We know that people that are more exposed to hot conditions tend to be more affected. So that could include outdoor workers and just people that are active outside, people that are unhoused. And even in, Vermont, where we have pretty small urban areas, we do see more impact in urban settings, to some extent because those urban areas tend to be hotter than other parts of the state. We know that people that have specific sensitivities to heat are more affected. That could be anyone early in the warm season, but then throughout the year that's more focused on older adults, young children, people that are pregnant, people that are overweight or have some kind of chronic medical condition, and using drugs, alcohol, and certain prescription medications can both increase sensitivity to heat and kind of decrease your ability to take safety actions. And then people that have limited adaptation resources, if you live alone, if you can't get to a community cooling site, or you can't keep your home cool, those are all factors that, when you kind of stack some of these up across categories, tend to lead to much increased risk for heat-related illnesses. I'm going to do a little bit of tragic example, just to show what we've seen in Vermont and elsewhere in the country, just to further understand who is most affected. This is an example from 2018, where we had a really unprecedented heat wave at the end of June and early July. And as far as our records go, this is probably the most impactful heat event that we've experienced, at least in the past 10-20 years. And there were 4 heat-related deaths during this week of heat, where temperatures were consistently above 95 and heat index values above 100. And all 4 of those deaths were people living alone in homes without air conditioning. There were other underlying, health complications. So just to emphasize that this is a population we're really concerned about, and that libraries can, potentially play a key role in supporting. Our numbers are fortunately rather small. We do have some data from from larger events, such as the heat dome event that happened in 2021 in the northwestern US and Western Canada, that really affected British Columbia, Washington State, and Oregon State. There were over 1,000 deaths linked to this heat wave, and they did really robust analysis in British Columbia of these deaths, and again found that the deaths largely occurred in residences. A lot of those folks live alone, and that most of them did not have AC or did not have functional AC. So again, just emphasizing this is a really critical group of folks that we're concerned about. I wanted to share that we don't have great data, but we expect that there is a lot of impact among unhoused folks. There are reasons why we don't have great data. Heat illnesses tend to be underreported. Housing status is often not reported in medical records. We just don't have great quantitative data about health impacts for unhoused folks related to heat. We've tried to address that through a partnership with Middlebury College in Vermont, and collected some narrative data through interviews through a fantastic student group a few years ago. This is something we're still working on refining and publishing, but we will have quotes and sound clips available on our website eventually. I did want to share this one quote, and I'll just read it. This is from a service provider for unhoused folks in Vermont who said, "We did have somebody in our county last summer who has been unhoused for quite a while. He unfortunately was trying to find shelter and shade in as many places as he could. He was kicked out of all the places that he could be, from bus stops and all kinds of places. And he passed away on a really hot summer day. So that was a pretty tragic situation." So, we've heard about some of this impact through these stories that we can't necessarily always pick up in our official health data. There were lots of folks that praised libraries as places where they can go to seek relief, but also indicated that there's a number of challenges with finding relief at libraries and other places. I'm going to circle back on that a little bit more. Okay, so that's the background. I'm going to jump into some information about what community cooling sites are, some things that you could be thinking about and doing in this next segment. And I want to start by just saying that, at least in Vermont, we don't have any kind of a formal definition for what a community cooling site is. There's no requirements, there's no specific parameters. We've tried to provide some guidance and set some expectations, but there's no like registration system or anything like that. So I want that to be clear, that I'm kind of sharing what we think of as best practices, but there's a lot of variation in here to make things work at your own facility. So we think of community cooling sites as helping provide temporary relief during the daytime from hot weather, and especially for people that can't stay cool in their home, and for people that are unhoused, work outdoors, or are otherwise exposed to hot outdoor conditions and need somewhere to seek relief. We'd like to think that indoor cooling sites can be established in pretty much any air-conditioned or naturally cooled building that can be open to the public. And in some cases, private buildings could also be used, whether formally, or sometimes people can just informally use stores, movie theaters. We know that people go to malls and places like that to seek relief during hot weather. I also want to be clear that we don't really have great evidence about the use and effectiveness of cooling sites, especially in rural communities. That most of the data that exists about use of cooling sites is from large urban areas that are largely serving an unhoused population. There's just not much data on the effectiveness of cooling sites in smaller communities. I've started to ask, whenever I get an opportunity, librarians and others for just even anecdotes about how their libraries are used during hot weather. So I have picked up a few little tidbits here and there that are useful. When we get around to discussion, I'd love to hear from anyone that may be collecting data or has any information to share about the use. The more we can document the use and effectiveness, the easier I think it will be to request resources to support libraries or other community facilities as cooling sites. One other thing I wanted to suggest is, if you're thinking about using your library as a cooling site, please coordinate with your local emergency management director, your local health office, whoever the relevant entity is in your area, to make sure that they're aware of this proposed use, that they can support it and help advertise it. So, please try to figure out who that person is to coordinate with. Again, if you have questions about who to coordinate with, I'm happy to provide support, or point you to the folks in your state for that support. And something else we like to think about is, or we like to encourage is to think about these cooling sites not just as like a standalone resource, but as part of a broader suite of community strategies. I'm going to give you a resource at the end that sort of helps support community planning for heat response, where cooling sites are one piece of that, but we think of outreach and emergency services, partnerships with local organizations that provide caregiving services. There's a lot of other folks that we'd love to be involved and kind of integrated in a more comprehensive community response. So we developed this typology of cooling sites because we ended up developing a mapping tool that uses this typology. But I thought this might be helpful to share that we think of everything.
Jared, something happened to your sound just then, at least for me.
Can you still hear me?
It's not working.
Yeah, it's like really low all of a sudden.
Can you hear me any better now?
No, still not working.
Yeah, that's weird.
I didn't do anything.
There any cables to reconnect? That was somebody's suggestion. It is odd.
Is it any better now?
No.
It's slightly improved, but it could be, do you need to leave and come back? I don't know.
I can try that.
Oh, there we go.
You're back.
It's back.
Okay. I just changed some setting to crank the mic volume up. Is it
Yep.
okay now?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
great now.
definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for catching me before I continued. So I was talking about the typology of cooling sites that range from everything from what we call a cool place, which might just be a library that has air conditioning and is open under normal hours. And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything extra. It's just invite people in, be welcoming, maybe aware that there might be some people using the facility just for cooling. But there's really no other need to change operations or anything else. The next step we would say is a cooling center, where a place is being specifically opened for cooling, like a fire station, perhaps, conference room that may not normally be open to the public. We've seen those open for cooling sites. Or at a place like a library, maybe you're doing something above and beyond what you would normally do, offering water, extending hours, hosting extra activities to draw people in. Like there's something else going on that you're really focused on, how to really maximize the use of the library as a cooling site. Cooling shelters are probably not super relevant for libraries, but that would be another tier, as places that can offer overnight accommodations. And then there are outdoor sites as well, which many of you may have outdoor facilities you can offer as part of what you could offer as a cooling site. These are some characteristics that we recommend. Again, nothing's really required, but some of the basic recommendations are things that you likely just offer by default. I'm going to talk about air conditioning a little bit more because I was specifically asked to talk about what facilities that don't have air conditioning can do. But normally we would say minimum recommendations are to have air conditioning, to allow people in for free, to be somewhere convenient for people to access, to be accessible, to provide access to restrooms and water, allow people to plug in medical equipment or other critical electric devices. Perhaps allow people to use the refrigerator if needed for something like medications, have seating available for everyone if possible, and to be widely advertised throughout the community. And I know outreach looks different, very different community to community. Just to throw out a few suggestions that we've seen from Vermont, in addition to things like social media, we've seen cooling sites advertised on Front Porch Forum, which is like a community level online discussion board. For communities that have VT alert capabilities, we've seen cooling site openings posted on those. Some people put out physical signs where if your library is somewhere with foot traffic or at least drive-by traffic. And this isn't exactly advertising, but something I just wanted to suggest too is we have lots of like heat safety tips and other resources available that we would really appreciate you making available in the library, either through printed copies or just sharing those resources through your electronic communications. What we say are more of the encouraged amenities that I would say start to make a difference between a cool place and a cooling center is being able to support visitors with public transportation or some kind of personal transportation assistance. We know that's a challenging barrier for a lot of folks, is just getting to a cooling site. Having activities available for guests, that's pretty easy for libraries, I would say. Having separate spaces available for different uses, especially if families with children are using the facility for cooling, having a separate space for them is ideal. Providing access to Wi-Fi and power, food and snacks, providing provisions for pets is really critical for a lot of folks to leave their home, if that's at all possible. Having a backup generator available for when there's power loss and high heat at the same time, which happens, and it may be somewhat rare, but there have been some really challenging circumstances where there's been no power and high heat at the same time. Providing extended hours if at all possible. I know staffing can be a major challenge. I did want to provide a couple of suggestions that we've seen in Vermont, from tapping Medical Reserve Corps volunteers, which you can often access through local health offices, finding other local volunteer partnerships. And some libraries have actually allocated small amounts of budget for emergency staffing, for extending hours for a limited number of hours. Having on-site health and social services that's one of those that's really challenging, but can be extremely valuable if you are bringing in folks that are there, primarily to use the site for cooling, not for traditional library purposes. We know libraries are already, dealing with managing a lot of different challenges, addiction, mental health, being unhoused, and I'm really curious to hear from you all about some of your strategies for that. Again, we're aware of some libraries that have paid or volunteer relationships to help provide that kind of support. So anyway, if anybody has suggestions for providing that support, I'd love it if you could share. And then having law enforcement or other site safety officers can be helpful in certain circumstances. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about air conditioning, or lack of air conditioning, and things that you could do. Just a few suggestions that we provide for any building that doesn't have air conditioning. Think about your basement space or microclimates within your building. Are there places that stay naturally cool I know there's at least one library we have on our state cooling sites map that doesn't have air conditioning, but has a really naturally cool basement that they use during hot weather. Are there lights or equipment, heat generating equipment that you can turn off if practical? Obviously, we don't want everybody sitting in the dark, but if there's, say, like a big copy machine or something that could be turned off, that can just help to reduce the heat buildup within the building. How can you use fans or window shades to help people stay comfortable? Can you run a dehumidifier to reduce the humidity in the building? If possible, keep the windows open overnight to cool the building. And consider if you need to set a threshold for closing buildings. At some point, it may just be too hot for a space to be occupied, and having that in mind in advance can be helpful. Think about how you can use outdoor spaces to help keep people cool. And then again, from like the community-wide approach, if your library isn't suitable for cooling, can, as a community, you identify other spaces that could be used. And when people come to the library seeking cooling, you'll know where to send people. Longer term, and I think a lot of these are much easier said than done, especially with the funding environment we're entering into now. But think about weatherization strategies for helping keep heat out of the building. How can you use install reflective window shades or awnings or other ways to increase shade on the building and especially on windows? Installing heat pumps is fantastic if you're able to do that. That could even just be done in a single room to provide at least one cool environment. Are there other ways to improve ventilation and airflow in the building? Can you plant trees outside to add shade? Or are there other ways to just kind of reduce the impervious surface outside, on the roof, in the parking lot? Any ways to get rid of impervious surface, and especially dark impervious surface, is helpful. Okay, so this is not related to cooling. The library is a cooling site, but I did just want to put in a plug for other things that libraries could potentially do or help coordinate, be thinking about during hot weather. And I wanted to mention this new guidance that we have coming out for caregivers to support family, friends, clients that might need help staying cool during hot weather. This provides some suggestions for how to, call, stop by, and check on folks, things to be thinking about. So if, you have certain patrons that you expect to show up every day, and somebody that you think might be pretty vulnerable to heat isn't showing up, can you give them a call? Are there folks that that would be particularly helpful to check in with during hot weather? Is that a role that library staff can play, or perhaps volunteers? So I was just trying to think about some other things that could potentially be done. I know you all already do so much, but wanted to at least plant one other seed about something that we think is really important to do during hot weather, whether it's from the libraries or from some other entity. I did want to give a little bit more guidance about when we think it's important to initiate these types of responses. This is sort of a risk chart that our weather service developed with our input about different heat index thresholds, where kind of mirrors what I described earlier, where we see some risk above 80, but the risk increases much more substantially above 90. The National Weather Service in Vermont will generally issue heat advisories when the heat forecast is when the heat is forecast to be 95 or above. And then very rarely we reach this 105 or above heat warning threshold. So we generally recommend communities to open and advertise cooling sites when the Weather Service issues those heat advisories. There are other circumstances that you might want to think about, particularly the early season heat. these are kind of Burlington specific thresholds. So if you live somewhere that's generally much cooler, you might want to take actions at lower temperatures. We see that these really aren't absolute thresholds, but they tend to be, we see impact relative to what people are used to. So if on a 90-degree day in Burlington, it's typically 85 where you live, then you may need to take some kind of action at a lower threshold. I just wanted to quickly mention that we developed this cooling sites map a few years back and did a lot of consultation with library partners, Joy, and individual libraries to develop this and on an ongoing basis to add sites to this map. This is a place where any facility can advertise themselves as being a cool place that people can go to either during like pre-scheduled like normal hours, or if there are special hours advertised, we'll update this in real time to reflect that. There's a bunch of attribute data you can pull up. You can search in a number of different ways. I'm not going to linger on this too long. There's PDF maps available and a searchable text database on the website for other ways that people might need to access the information. And then for anyone in Vermont that is not on this map yet and would like to be, we do have a link to a cooling site. It's a Microsoft form that you can fill out and provide us with information about your site. You can also use this there's a really short version if you just have some small updates you want us to make. And then there's also a way to use this to let us know that you're activating for an event, and we'll make a change on the map that makes activated sites pop out more. And then I just wanted to close with just to mention a few different heat safety resources I wanted you to be aware of. One is our local hot weather preparedness guidance. This is something that we've been working on with regional planning staff and local health staff to support municipal partners with developing hot weather response plans. In Vermont, these have typically been adopted as annexes to the local emergency management plan, and community cooling sites are one piece of this. I mentioned a few others earlier with outreach and the role of emergency services. There's a number of different topics in here you can see in the table of contents. So ideally, we'd love it if the cooling site strategy was just one piece of this larger strategy. We have a lot of heat safety guidance on our website in English and translated in, I think, 12 different languages. We have both written information, and through a partnership with the Vermont Language Justice Project, we have some videos in different languages. I think there's 15 there with heat safety guidance. So lots of just basic heat safety information here that you can send folks to, or potentially print and have available. And then I mentioned the caregiver guidance before. We have some other more specific resources for schools and childcares. For example, there are a few different more specific resources on our site. And then I think the last thing I want to mention is this outreach toolkit, which you can download in Word. So it's easier to copy and paste out of. And this has a bunch of templates for Front Porch Forum messaging, for social media, a bunch of just like key messages bullets that you can use and repackage in whatever form you want. So a lot of just pre-written heat safety media that we'd love for you to use in any way you can. Okay, that was the end of my presentation. So I'll pass it back to you, Joy.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to say that I would assume that many of these things you mentioned in Vermont are also available in other states, something similar. So for those of you who aren't from Vermont, poke around in your Department of Health and probably you'll find some of those same things. And for the Vermont people, I just want to make a reminder that we do put this information out in the digest. When I get the emails from Jared, we send it out, and that digest goes out to all the libraries in the state. So there's probably a method of communication like that in the other states as well. So we did get one question, and it was about the humidity levels. At what point does that kick in and factor into, the ranking of the category that the heat goes into and how people should respond?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. And apologies because I wasn't super clear about that before. I often say temperature and heat index and use them interchangeably, but in those slides, we're referring to those National Weather Service thresholds that relate to the heat index. So those kind of build humidity considerations in. So if you're looking at the heat index forecast, you don't really have to worry about what exactly the humidity is. It's kind of integrated in there. Usually the higher humidity values, aren't too much of a concern until temperatures get above 85 or so. Indoors, typically having less than 60% humidity is recommended just for indoor comfort. Outdoors, I don't know that there's a real clear threshold, but it certainly factors into increasing discomfort and increasing health risk.
Okay, so I think that was our only question, but it would be great. Jared mentioned a few times how we'd like to hear examples of what libraries are doing. So if people want to put those in the chat, that would be lovely. So, and we can collect those and share afterwards. So thank you so much, Jared. We're going to move on to just another, just a quick thing about another Vermont initiative that I think also might be something that has happened in other states or could happen in other states. So I just have one quick, two quick slides about that. So Kelly, if somebody could tell me if
it's starting.
it is
Yep,
starting.
it's there.
Okay. Okay. So you're seeing the full screen slide of
No, I'm seeing the not full screen slide.
Oh, wait, here we go. How's that? That seems like a huge slide to me.
Now that one is the I mean, you could see it, but it's like the preview one.
It doesn't say check out forestry.
It does say that.
Okay. What else?
And it has shows you a preview of the next slide.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Well, that's a giveaway of my next slide, but I'm just going to leave it like that in the interest of time. I'm also going to say that at Vermont Department of Libraries, we present on Teams. So I told Kelly I do book club on Zoom, but I don't normally present on Zoom. But I do want to tell people about this very cool program that we have in Vermont. It's called Check Out Forestry, and it's a project of the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program, which is part of the at the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. So it is a new financial and technical assistance program, and it's open to all Vermont public libraries. They just did the grant application, so that's completed now, but they hope to do this again. So, and the goal of the project is to create more inviting, functional, and sustainable spaces for everyone to enjoy by planting trees on public library grounds. So it also gives public libraries educational opportunities. A lot of libraries do outdoor education already, so this is another way to expand on that. And it gives the libraries the chance to model green infrastructure and demonstrate the benefits of urban forestry to their communities. So it provides $15,000 to distribute among 3 libraries for projects that support increased shade, to improve programming space, enhance outdoor education, and sustainability efforts such as stormwater mitigation. So the implementation of this, which they've already chosen the libraries for this year, but they'll pick, they've chosen the libraries. Those libraries will get at least 2 site visits from the staff from the Urban and Community Forestry department, and they'll meet with the project leads, they'll assess the site conditions and establish a planting plan. And then they'll also select, purchase, and plant the trees that are suitable for the specific grounds that they've chosen. And they'll purchase essential supplies like irrigation tools and mulch, and they'll ensure successful establishment and growth. So then they'll also give tree care training to the staff of the library, municipal staff, if they're involved, and optional training for the public as well. So a lot of times libraries have volunteers that take care of their grounds, so they could train those volunteers as well. So important note is that all the coordination of the plant purchase and planting is done by that forestry staff. So easy lift for the libraries. So that takes advantage of their expertise, and it also simplifies the implementation of the program. So that means that they manage all the contracts, they buy the necessary materials, and the library staff doesn't have to get bids and write RFPs, source the trees, and then figure out what's allowable and not by the grant. They just don't have to worry about that at all. The application process is very simple. The average time it took for the libraries to apply was 16 minutes, very short little grant application. They didn't need to design the project ahead of time, and they didn't need to submit certificates of insurance or show proof of good standing or those kind of things that sometimes grant applications require. And I will say this made it pretty popular with our libraries. We often find that our libraries' grant proposals can be too big of a lift, and they just don't have capacity to do an involved grant application, no matter how intrigued they are by by what would be funded. So I'm happy to say that the 3 libraries that have been selected are the Carpenter Karst Library in Heinsberg, Vermont, the Morristown Centennial Library, which is in Morristown, and the Varna Memorial Library in Jeffersonville, Vermont. So they're going to be able to beautify their outdoor spaces, make the spaces more conducive to outdoor programming and seating for all, lots of shade and nice places for people to just sit and relax or read, but also do programming. And again, it makes their spaces more resilient to things like stormwater. And we've had some terrible floods in Vermont, so it's really important to do everything that we can in those public spaces. So we're super grateful to the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program for involving libraries in this way. Now, my next slide that you can see that I meant to save till later, but Adam, who's from the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program, would have been here today to talk about this, but he is at the State House pruning trees on the State House lawn. And that is not a picture from today, but that's what it looks like when he's doing that. So that's my little happy story about Vermont libraries and forestry. Now I'm going to stop sharing. Yes.
There's a question asking if the application, even though it's closed, could be put in the chat so they could see the form, because they'd love to see, what it looked like.
Yeah, maybe I'll dig around for it. I'm not sure if there's still access to it or not, but that's a good question. And I can probably find it and share later,
Okay.
even if not. So I'm sorry for the awkward sharing, but it was the information I wanted to get to, because we're just very happy about this program, and the libraries are super excited about it. And we are now going to move into the panel part of our program. And I'm going to introduce our first panelist, is also from Vermont. It's Brenda Stanley. And Brenda she's been the director of the Enosburg Public Library in Enosburg Falls, Vermont since 2016. She has a certificate of public librarianship from the Vermont Department of Libraries, and she's a recognized leader in offering innovative, community-engaged programming in rural libraries. So thank you so much for being here, Brenda.
Thank you, Joy. So as Joy said, I'm the director of the Enosburg Public Library. We are up in the northern part of Vermont. We are 5-minute drive from the Canadian border. And we're an hour from our biggest city, which is Burlington. We're a rural community with a population of about 2,700. Our library is 3,000 square feet. We're in the center of the village, but we're a town municipal library because our village and town are different governments, of course. Makes it tricky some days. We're known for our Vermont June Dairy Festival. It's always the first weekend in June. It starts off with a parade on a Saturday, and it ends with a cow plop contest on Sunday afternoon. So we are very rural. When you pick a square and pay for a square and hope that a cow will plop on it. You know, you're rural. We're about, I don't know, a block away from the schools. There's an elementary school from preschool to 5th, and then a high school, middle school from 6th through 12th. Only about 400 kids altogether in there, so we're small. One of the things why Joy asked me to speak about this is a little bit about what we do as a cooling site. We're open 56 hours a week, which is the most any library in Franklin County is open. And we're as I said, a small town. We're very fortunate. Our community supports that 2 people are always on staff for safety reasons, and it also lets us do a lot more programming. So we're always got things going on here. And one of the things we do in the summer is we promote that we're open as a cooling site. All those hours we're open, and we'll advertise on social media, the town website. Front Porch Forum was mentioned, and we find most of our seniors use Front Porch Forum because they're not comfortable with social media. So that's a way to get the word out to them. Plus, we also put an A-frame sign out at the end of our walk by the road so that we are promoting it. I've been known to come in on a Sunday when it's really hot, bring my sewing machine in, unlock the door, and people know they can just come in and hang out. We do have a meeting room, so that way if a family wants some space away from the main part of the library, they're able to come back here. We have a fridge for the staff, but we do let the public use it during the summer with the heat. We also, as I said, we have a little kitchen, no stove or anything, but we have a microwave, we have a coffee maker, sink, so they're able to do things they would do at home, but in the library. We do, through a grant, we keep a supply of healthy snacks in a fridge out in the main part of the library. It's a small fridge, and we have fresh fruit and vegetables we keep out there also in baskets, and the public can just help themselves. So that's a good avenue. We also, on the flip side, not just as a cooling site, in the winter, we do the same thing when it's really cold. We do have a homeless population here. And one of the things they're very appreciative of is the fact that we are so welcoming when they want to come in, because there are days they are here all 10 hours we are open, whether it's in the summer when it's hot or in the winter when it's really cold. So you have, in my opinion, you have to think of both scenarios as a cooling site, but then also on the flip side, you need to provide for those who, due to our economy, maybe they're keeping their house down at 45 degrees, which we do have a couple of our seniors doing that. So we do encourage them to come in here. In the summer, we have a lot of people with no air conditionings at all. And the library becomes their safe haven. For the kids, we'll pull out we call it a Dunkin' booth, but it's really not. It's a system where a pail of cold water will dump on them by throwing a beanbag at it. We'll take that out. We'll take our slip and slide out. So the kids can go out, they get wet, they come in, we have some towels here, they can dry off, and they can just have some fun. And it's just being creative. I mean, as I said, I bring in my sewing machine, I'll sit and sew on a Sunday because I'm volunteering that time. I've also been known to come in and say, hey, let's turn the TV on. Anybody want to watch a movie? Because we do have some movie licensing, so we can do that too. We have 2 different TVs. One is portable we bring out, and one is mounted to the wall. So we can even have that a family comes in the meeting room and watch TV. We do allow pets in our library. We have always been, since I've been here, I started that as long as it's well behaved, I don't care if it comes in here. I just as soon get down on the floor and play with it if it's a nice little doggy. So just be flexible is my main thing that I would promote with being a cooling site. It's easy to do. I mean, just promote it, be welcoming, and You know, yeah, the fridge might be for staff, but it's okay. Other people can put their food in there. Just don't eat my lunch on me. So I guess those are the main things I have.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so much.
Brenda.
Yeah. All right. And what if anyone has questions, if you put them in the Q&A, we'll address all the questions after all of our panelists have spoken. Okay. So next on our panel, we're going to hear from Julie Holden. Julie is the Assistant Library Director at Cranston Public Library here in Rhode Island. CPL often runs health programming and is invested in developing a community safety net. Julie?
Hello, everyone, and greetings from tiny Rhode Island. I just wanted to mention before I started that we are also a warming center for cold snaps in the winter too. So everything I say about cooling center also applies in the winter as well. So if you haven't been to Rhode Island or you don't know much about Rhode Island, we are the smallest state in the country. And Cranston is located in sort of the geographic center of the state in a metro area. We have the state capital, Providence, to the north, and Warwick, where the airport is located, to the south. And so it's a very metro urban area that we are located in. About 83,000 people in Cranston. And our library system has 6 buildings. The main library, and then 5 neighborhood branches. We have quite a bit of physical circulation. Our library is located in between 2 major highways. We have a huge parking lot, so we're very popular. We're in a very commercial area with a lot of shopping and access to some major roads. So in Rhode Island, we have 39 cities and towns, but we have 79 public library buildings. So we really like our libraries here. They're very popular. They're pretty well funded, and so every library in Rhode Island has the opportunity to be a cooling center. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, if any library out there is thinking about becoming a cooling center or a cooling site, is that a lot of our residents get confused about a cooling center versus an emergency shelter. So we are not an emergency shelter. We will often get calls asking us, like, how many cots do we have, or can we sleep overnight? And I don't blame the public for being confused about this, because when there's a heat wave and the emergency alerts go out and they say, you know, look for your local cooling center, I don't blame people for thinking that we're an emergency shelter, but you just might want to be prepared for that conversation. In Cranston, the only official emergency shelter is the senior center, because they have all the cots and for sleeping. They have a big cafeteria for food, but they're not typically used during heat waves as a shelter. It would only be for like a really catastrophic weather event where maybe the Red Cross would come in and set up at the senior center. This isn't to say that the library that I'm at, the Central Library, would never be an emergency shelter if we had a need to be. If there was some really extreme event, we'd be happy to open up as an emergency shelter if we had, you know, the supplies and the equipment and the staffing to do so. So if any library out there is thinking about becoming a cooling center, just make sure you know where to point people to for the emergency shelter that's in your community for sleeping overnight. So last year in Rhode Island, we had at least 3 heat waves that I can remember. We had one in June, one in July, and one in August. Rhode Island has a long coastline and a lot of beaches, so we do have a little bit of a cool part to the state. But I know in central Massachusetts and central Connecticut, it gets extremely hot, hotter than it ever gets in Rhode Island. But we still had 3 heat waves last year, and even in between the heat waves, I think it was fairly hot. Even if it didn't reach 95 degrees, it was still 88 degrees, 89 degrees. So it is getting hotter, and people do need places to cool off. And I think the library is the perfect place. So in the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency website, the Central Library is listed as the official cooling center, but all of our libraries are cooling centers. And the reason why we have the Central Library as the official one is because it was too complicated to list all of our libraries and all of their hours on the emergency management website. We do have 3 of our buildings are run by an online building management system, so I can log in remotely. I can even log in from my phone from anywhere. I can be in a different state and log into the air conditioning system and reset something or check on a piece of equipment that isn't running right. We do have water fountains in all of our libraries, and some of them have the water bottle feature. But we do not provide bottled water or snacks or refrigeration. I know Brenda's library was doing that, but we are kind of the exact opposite. We don't really provide anything extra while we're a cooling center. And then all of our patrons know, if they, if they're listening to the news or on their apps, that the Emergency Management Agency is really great about posting the list of cooling centers and putting it on the media. And we put it on social media as well to let people know, hey, come on into the library and cool off for a little bit. So as far as patrons coming into the building or people coming into the building who've never been to the library before, we don't really have a specific policy on being a cooling center. We don't open additional days or hours. The Central Library is open 6 days a week in the summer. We don't bring on additional staff. And we do have a code of conduct, which all of our patrons have to follow, regardless of whether we're a cooling center or not. So you see in the picture, the student is sleeping. We don't allow people to sleep in our library, even when we're a cooling center, because a lot of times we found that people are actually having a medical event. They're not really sleeping because they're taking a nap, but maybe they have a medication issue. Maybe they're having a struggle with maybe they're having low blood sugar. So we always check on patrons who are sleeping to make sure that they're okay. But we do have a little bit of flexibility when people come in for the first time, and you can decide for your own library what flexibility you want to have in your facility. But for us, we may be a little bit more flexible about like no food in the library. People might not know that. If they come in and maybe they have a sandwich with them, we're not going to kick them out because they brought in a sandwich. Maybe someone wants more than 4 hours per day on our public computers. That's okay. We'll make an exception. I know Jared mentioned about electrical outlet use. People might want to bring in something to recharge, and normally we wouldn't allow a lot of recharging in the library for anything other than a cell phone or a laptop, but we might be flexible about that. So you can decide for yourself which policies you're going to enforce and which ones you aren't. But our behavior policies always remain in full force and effect. We don't let people just sort of run rampant through the library just because we're a cooling center. We do try to maintain order if we can. So. And then finally, I just wanted to share some additional points. It's really just business as usual. We don't do extra programming because we always have a slate of programming every week anyway. People are welcome to come in. We have easy chairs, we have tables and chairs, we have study carrels, we have quiet spaces, we have conversation spaces, we have program rooms. So there's something for everyone. When we do become a cooling center or a warming center, we use our social media to sort of promote it as a way to get people to come in and maybe sign up for a library card for the first time. So it is a good way to reach out to new library users and show them what you have and show them the magazines and the movies and the music CDs and all the programs that you offer and the story time. And it's a great opportunity to open up your library to new people. And then just unlike Brenda, we unfortunately do not allow pets in the library. We do allow service animals as required by ADA, but a lot of people, yeah, pets are sort of a no-go for us, even when we're a cooling center. But again, if there were ever something really catastrophic that happened, and we needed to use the library as an emergency facility, we would, of course, coordinate with any local authorities about becoming an emergency shelter for something like that. But it's really easy to be a cooling center. You really don't have to do anything extra. You can make it as broad as you want. You can add extra programming and set up stations for crafts or puzzles or games if you need to. We don't find that that's necessary. And we don't really offer anything extra special, but we're happy to meet new people and we're happy to introduce people to our library, and we're happy to promote ourselves as a cooling center during the summer. And that's my contact information if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Julie. All right. Let me just remove that. And so our final panelist today is Todd Manny. Todd is the Director of Emergency Management and Community Outreach for the town of Smithfield, Rhode Island. And he'll be discussing a portable cooling center that his agency acquired through a mini grant. So, Todd, the virtual floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm just going to get my PowerPoint presentation up here. All right. I think that's it. So can everybody hear me? Can I just give you a thumbs up, Kelly?
Yep, can hear and see you.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for having me today. I just want to touch very briefly on our climate change mini grant that we got from the Rhode Island Department of Health. This was awarded to us in May of 2018 for just under $2,000. And it's a portable cooling center. And as I hear this conversation continuing today, I'm going to shy away from the word cooling center because it does cause confusion to the general public. You know, I think that cooling center is an internal word that we use within the emergency management within municipal government, and it has a definition. But for the public, you know, maybe it's a place to beat the heat, maybe it's a place to cool off, so that people really do have expectations of what they're going into. So that's something that I'm taking away from this meeting today. So this is an idea for those libraries that may not have air conditioning. This might be an idea for a smaller library that wishes to provide some space and a place for those individuals who wish to beat the heat and wish to cool off during extreme days. You know, in emergency management, we realized a while ago that our environment is changing, and we were actually interviewed for a 2015 state climate change and health resiliency report. There's a much younger picture of me at the time. I didn't realize how much I aged until I pulled this picture up. I said, boy, I had a lot more hair back then. You know, our changing environment is something that we at emergency management look at because we're seeing more extremes in natural events and natural hazards. It's either we get no rain or all the rain at the same time, and that is the same with heat and cold as well. We're grateful for our libraries within the town of Smithfield. We have two: the Smithfield Public Library and the Greenville Public Library. We have great partnerships with our librarians because they also help us to distribute information to the general public during an emergency. And we're very grateful for that. But really the concept that we had that when we designed our portable cooling center, we had a primary mission was that we want to have a portable system that could be sent to emergency scenes to assist firefighters and other public employees who are required to work out of doors during days that we were suffering a dangerous heat stress index. And I know that somebody had mentioned heat stress before, the temperature and the humidity, and I'll speak a little bit about that in another slide or two. But really, we want to have something that we could deploy during house fires, brush fires, hazardous materials incidents, water main breaks, other utility failures, could be wires that are down, things like that, where we had individuals who had to be out in these environments and there was no point of shade. So we wanted to have a quick deploying capability. The secondary mission of this is that we wanted to deploy a portable cooling center during those special outdoor events that were going to occur on extremely hot days. Things like road races, festivals, food truck nights, things like that emerged in our community. We wanted to have a portable system that we could bring a cooling place, a cooling center right to that particular event. So that we could provide some relief to individuals, similar to, you know, maybe a library that you know has a field in back but no air conditioning inside, so something of that nature. So when we talk about that heat stress index and also that road race event alert system, here's that heat stress index chart, and if you see right on the top here, That is the relative humidity in the air, and on the side over on this section, you can see the temperature. So this heat stress index chart correlates with this event alert system for inclement weather conditions, really for athletic events. Back in October of 2007, the Chicago Marathon had a major heat emergency that occurred during their annual marathon. And they ended up having humidity values of 65% and extremely rare air temperature of 88 degrees, causing a feel-like temperature of almost 98 degrees during this marathon. So they had people who were becoming very ill because of the temperature. People were suffering from hyperthermia, being too hot. The event alert system really started to develop in the aftermath of that particular marathon, because we needed to do a better job for these extremely hot days in times when you're not expecting very hot weather at all. So monitoring that is very important. So that's both the heat stress index chart and how it correlates with the event alert chart. So what we bought when we we applied for our grant, we wanted a 10 by 20 tent. We purchased 3 of these misting fans. In the bottom is a 7-gallon tank that we can put water in. There's a fan that spins, and actually on the surface of this grate, you can't see it very clearly, but there's small nozzles which will distribute the water. So when the fans are on, a pump will start. It'll draw water out of the tank and put tiny water droplets mist in the air, which will cool people down. Depending on the day and how much electricity we have, we will add barrel fans to this setup as well. So for the three misting fans that we have, we'll add 2 large barrel fans. And believe it or not, on the hottest days, when you're under the tent, it'll drop the temperature by almost 25 degrees. And this can happen right outside your library. You can create a 10 by 20 foot space with this equipment and with these devices, and it'll drop that temperature remarkably. When we started this idea and this concept, we needed to provide some relief. Like I said, the primary mission, we needed to provide relief to firefighters who had to be working out in adverse weather conditions because of their emergency. I'll tell you one thing, I was remarkably shocked how well it worked on a day where we had a house fire and it was about 90 degrees outside. It was an absolutely invaluable tool in preventing people from being transported to the hospital and from preventing people from getting sick. We also deployed it during a softball tournament that we have. We have a regional softball tournament we have on the 4th of July weekend. The temperature had reached, I think it was about 100 degrees at the highest point, at the hottest point of the day. And we deployed our cooling center, portable cooling center, and it just worked marvelously, keeping people cool, both the spectators as well as the players and people who just wanted to kind of rotate through and cool off. This little device right over here, this is a heat stress monitor. It's called a wet bulb globe thermometer. And what that wet bulb globe thermometer does is it's a thermometer that that you can set up, and it will measure both the air temperature as well as the humidity in the air, and it'll automatically calculate that out to you so that you can see what the heat stress particularly happens to be in a specific area at a specific time. We can set alarms with that small device as well. And if the temperature goes up 2 degrees or 3 degrees or reaches a specific threshold that we have, it'll actually alert us. So we won't even have to always be paying attention to what the heat stress monitor is telling us. As long as the alerts and the alarms are on, we can go ahead and set that in a way that it'll alert for us. So that's pretty much the equipment that we have and the equipment that we bought with that initial grant. We've continued to build that out over time so that we have not just one set of equipment now, we actually have two sets of equipment now so that we can send it out and either deal with two emergencies at one time or one special event and be ready for an emergency should that occur. We train our emergency management volunteers on how to, utilize the tools and the equipment, especially the heat stress monitor as well, so that and we coordinate very closely with race event folks in our community. That whenever we have a road race, we're monitoring the heat stress. So in the event that we ever have another incident or a similar set of circumstances like they found in Chicago during the marathon in October, we can alert their race staff very quickly that the temperature is changing, it's climbing, and runners may not realize it until they become very sick. We can actually slow the race down or even stop the race depending on what the emergency happens to be. So I want to thank you all for for allowing me to speak with this group today. I'm amazed as to how many people have joined and the number of participants in. Here's my contact information here, and if you would like to give me a call, that 1095 number is my direct extension, as well as my email as well. So with that, Kelly, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Todd. We do have time for now for Q&A. If anyone has questions, I did see that there was one in the chat that was for you, Todd, about where you purchased the outdoor cooling fan.
We don't recommend anything where we buy stuff from, but I will tell you that there's a company called Uline. They may have them. Grainger as well. And really the industrial stores, industrial supply stores, where you probably buy a lot of stuff already from. Go ahead and look at those places for where you can buy that equipment. But Uline, Grainger, places like that. But we can. I think we did when we did Oz, we found the most economic place was that first place that starts with the U. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
I also included in that chat some resources for your participants, both a heat stress index chart, a heat stress index chart calculator, which you can keep on your computer, some important extreme heat information, both from the National Weather Service and our partners over at the Federal Emergency Management at ready.gov, which is extreme heat and their section on that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I truly appreciate being here.
I don't see anything in the Q&A at the moment, so
There
I
were a few
think-
people who posted about things that their libraries do, outdoor tables and benches purchased by the Friends of the Library for shade. And then see the splash day. I just want to make sure everyone sees these. Let's see. Oh, yeah, splash day is where they set out waiting pools and water tables on the lawn for kids and families to cool off. And then a place in Wisconsin is currently working on a community residence center plan as part of their current expansion project and hope to qualify as a cooling center at this point. They're already a cooling site. So looks like there's lots of good stuff going on out there. Does anyone else have questions or comments, things they want to share? Okay, well, if not, I'd like to thank everyone for coming again. A special thanks to all the presenters and panelists. So great to learn from you. A link to the recording will be emailed to you, and the recording and slides will also be posted on the New Hampshire State Library website on their LibGuide page. So you'll be receiving an evaluation as well. And thank you again for coming.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Stop the recording.